Believe it or not, there was a time in my life when I had an extremely complicated mobility routine. I had just completed my yoga certification and thought that the more exercises I did, the better it would be. My goal was to train my body as much as possible until I became the most flexible and mobile person on the planet. But do you know what happened? It completely backfired. When we overload both the body and the mind, two things usually happen. The first is that the body actually becomes even stiffer because excessive effort creates physical stress. Instead of relaxing and gaining mobility, the body protects itself by creating muscular tension. The second is information overload. You look at so many different exercises, techniques, and routines that you end up thinking, I do not even know where to start. And then, because you feel overwhelmed, you end up doing absolutely nothing. And this combination is exactly what keeps many people trapped in a constant cycle of pain, stiffness, and difficulty moving. Over time, as I studied mobility and flexibility more deeply, I realized something very important. An effective routine does not need to be complicated. In fact, today my mobility practice is extremely simple. And that is exactly what I want to share with you. 3 fundamental movements, with a few variations, that may be all you truly need to develop mobility, flexibility, and freedom of movement. We are going to focus on 3 essential pillars of mobility: strength, joint lubrication, and balance. These 3 elements are the true foundation of a mobile and functional body. Why? Because when you have strength, your nervous system feels safe. The brain understands that your body is capable of supporting a certain position or movement. It trusts you. It is as if the body were saying, "It's okay, she can support this. She is strong enough." The second point is joint lubrication. When the joints are healthy and moving well, the body is able to move smoothly through space without stiffness, restriction, or discomfort. And it is muscular strength that supports this smooth and safe movement. The third element is balance, which is also directly connected to the nervous system. To maintain balance, the body needs to trust that you have enough strength to remain stable without falling. When you are able to support your own body with stability, the brain relaxes and allows freer and more natural movement. In other words, strength truly is the foundation of everything. And the good news is that this does not need to be complicated. You do not need to memorize dozens of difficult exercises or spend hours training. If your goal is to build a solid foundation of mobility and flexibility, especially if you experience pain, stiffness, or difficulty moving, this information is already enough to transform your body. So let's begin with the first fundamental movement, the squat. Now, I am going to show you a few squat variations because each one works different muscle groups. You can alternate between them daily to build a much more complete and balanced physical foundation. Starting with the parallel squat. And here is something very important. Start small. If you have difficulty squatting deeply, that is completely okay. Even a slight bend in the knees already counts as a squat. You do not need to go all the way down for the exercise to work. You can begin by simply bending your knees slightly and then returning to the starting position. That alone already strengthens important muscles around the joints. You will begin to feel your glutes activating, your quadriceps working, and even your ankles gaining mobility, areas that often go years without receiving proper attention. And remember, the squat works several areas of the body at the same time: ankles, knees, quadriceps, glutes, spine, core. It is one of the most complete and powerful movements for improving mobility and functional strength. Practicing it daily can truly transform your quality of life. My recommendation is to start with 10 parallel squats using whatever range of motion feels comfortable for you. After that, try the Malasana squat. And again, it can be small. There is no need to force your body. Another important detail that many people forget: you can hold on to something for support. A chair, table, or wall can help a lot while your body builds strength, mobility, and confidence. It is perfectly okay to start from the absolute basics. In fact, that is the best path. The goal is to build a sense of safety within the body. When the body feels safe, it relaxes, gains confidence, and begins moving with much greater freedom. Now let's move on to the Malasana squat. In this movement, the feet point outward at approximately 45 degrees and are positioned slightly wider than hip width apart. As you begin lowering yourself, I want you to shift your body weight slightly backward. It may feel strange at first, but this helps a lot with balance and prevents that feeling of falling backward. The secret is exactly in the combination of the hips moving slightly backward while the chest comes slightly forward. Many people do the opposite. They throw the chest backward and end up losing balance. When you create this balance between the hips and torso, the movement becomes much more stable and comfortable. Another important point, avoid rounding your spine. Your posture should remain neutral. If possible, even maintain a slight natural curve in the lower back without exaggerating it. So to recap, feet at 45 degrees, knees bend, hips move slightly backward, chest leans gently forward, spine remains neutral, then simply rise back up again. You bend and extend your legs. Simple as that. Perform 10 repetitions at your own pace. Now we already have two types of squats, the parallel squat and the Malasana squat. So let's move on to the third variation, the goddess squat, also known as the wide stance squat. And yes, many people ask whether there is another name for this exercise. There is the wide squat. In this case, the feet are positioned much wider than hip width. Now we are talking about a truly wide stance. And here you can explore different widths until you find a position that feels comfortable for your body. As you gain mobility and strength, you can gradually increase the distance between your feet. Once again, remember to keep your chest lifted. This helps a lot with balance and prevents the feeling of falling backward. A slight forward lean of the torso also helps stabilize the body. And of course, keep your core engaged the entire time. Now here comes a very important detail in this exercise. When bending your knees, think about gently pushing them outward and backward. Avoid letting your knees collapse inward because this increases stress on the joints and disrupts the alignment of the movement. By directing your knees outward, you also strengthen the external rotation of the hips, which is extremely important for balance, mobility, and stability. Then simply return to the starting position. You lower down and rise back up. And remember, you do not need to go very deep at the beginning. Depth will come naturally over time. But there is something truly enjoyable about realizing that as you gain strength and mobility, your body begins to feel freer to explore wider and more comfortable movements. So now we have 10 parallel squats, 10 Malasana squats, and 10 wide or goddess squats. Together, these three movements create an incredible foundation of strength, mobility, and stability for the entire body. So in total, we are talking about 30 squats per day. It may seem like a lot at first, but you do not need to do everything at once. You can split them throughout the day or even alternate the squat variations during the week. For example, Monday, parallel squat, Tuesday, Malasana squat, Wednesday, wide squat, or perhaps Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The important thing is to adapt the practice to your routine. Make it work for you. And believe me, this takes much less time than it seems. You can do it while making coffee, watching television, listening to music, talking to someone, or even during short breaks throughout the day. Movement does not need to feel complicated or emotionally exhausting. You do not need to think, "My goodness, now I need to find time to exercise." The idea is to naturally integrate movement into your life. If you are working, do 10 quick squats between tasks. If you are listening to a video or podcast, take advantage of that moment. Then continue normally with your day. The simpler and more natural this feels, the greater the chances that you will stay consistent. And consistency is exactly what transforms the body. Now let's move on to the second group of movements that should be part of your daily routine. Here we are going to work on something extremely important, balance and joint lubrication. When we talk about joint lubrication, we are mainly referring to stimulating the production of synovial fluid. This fluid acts like a natural oil for the joints. It is what allows the knees, hips, shoulders, and other joints to move smoothly without excessive friction. When we spend too much time without moving a joint, it begins to become stiff. It is as if the structures around the joint begin to stick together. Over time, this creates that feeling of stiffness, tightness, or difficulty moving freely. Many people describe it as feeling like they are moving their body through something heavy, instead of experiencing smooth and light movement. Think about a door hinge. When it stays without movement for too long, it starts creaking and getting stuck. But when we apply oil and move it regularly, everything begins functioning smoothly again. The exact same thing happens with the joints. Movement is what lubricates the body. That is why it is so important to move the joints in different directions and ranges of motion. And this applies to practically every part of the body. The hips, for example, can move in many different directions. The shoulders can as well. You can move your arms and legs forward, backward, sideways, and through rotations. And all of this requires strength, control, and body awareness. Now let's move on to the first movement of this stage, knee circles. This exercise may seem simple, but it is extremely effective for improving mobility, circulation, and joint awareness. And yes, sometimes even very active people struggle with it, especially when the muscles are tired or sore. That is completely normal. Mobility does not mean perfection. It simply means keeping the body moving in a safe, consistent, and comfortable way. In fact, this even helps me notice how much my muscles are being activated while practicing these knee circles. And over time, I want you to reach the point where you can perform this movement standing on only one leg. Even if it feels difficult or unstable at first, that is part of the process. Balance is trained exactly this way. You can begin by holding onto a chair, wall, or any sturdy support. Gradually, as your body gains confidence and strength, it will become easier to move your leg freely while maintaining stability. And this is something very important. When you are able to balance better, your body begins to trust you more. Your nervous system understands. She can hold this position. She is not going to fall. That feeling of safety allows the body to relax and move with much greater freedom. Another great option for beginners is performing knee circles in a tabletop position, with your hands and knees supported on the floor. You can also experiment with these movements in more advanced positions, such as the yoga downward dog pose, adding knee circles to further challenge mobility, strength, and control. And remember, there is always room to improve. You can continue deepening your mobility practice and become increasingly advanced. But if we are talking about that essential foundation, that solid base for a healthy and mobile body, mastering these movements is already transformative. Now, when we talk about full range of motion, this also applies to other joints. The shoulders, for example, need to move in multiple directions. Internal and external rotation movements are also extremely important. And interestingly, knee circles already work several of these functions at the same time. Internal rotation, external rotation, extension, flexion, balance, coordination. That is why knee circles end up being one of the best options for overall body mobility. So, simply remember, move your hips and shoulders in different directions, do ankle circles, wrist circles, and explore comfortable ranges of motion. And there is an interesting detail. These joints respond even better when there is light resistance or load. For example, placing weight on your wrists while doing circles, or holding light weights in your hands during arm movements. This increases the stimulus and strengthens the muscles and joints even more. But to keep everything simple, if you do knee circles and arm circles, you will already be covering a huge portion of the body's basic mobility needs. Now we have reached the third and final essential element for building a solid mobility foundation: balance. And when I talk about balance, I am not referring only to the ability to stand still on one leg. I am also talking about the ability to move through space with control and stability. That means walking, leaning the body, changing direction, squatting, standing up, and maintaining control during all of these movements. And for this, I want to show you two very effective exercises. You can choose whichever works best for you. Both are excellent. The first is the single-leg Romanian deadlift. It may sound like a complicated name, but the movement is simple. You stand supported on one leg while the other leg slowly moves backward. At the same time, the arm on the same side as the leg moving backward lowers toward the floor. Then you slowly return to the starting position. This exercise works on balance, strength, hip stability, coordination, and deep body control. In addition, it teaches the body to remain stable while moving, exactly what we need to prevent falls and improve everyday mobility. And as always, start small. You do not need to touch the floor or lift your leg very high. The most important thing is to maintain control, stability, and confidence during the movement. And remember, you do not necessarily need to touch the floor. You can simply lean your body forward, lightly touch a table, chair, or any secure support, and then return to the starting position. The important thing is to practice the movement and teach the body to find stability. Another option is to simply move the leg backward and practice balancing while standing on one foot. And here is something very common. You will probably feel cramps or fatigue in the foot that is supporting you on the floor. This happens because those small muscles in the foot and ankle are usually not accustomed to supporting so much pressure and control.